Hey, stop! Before you play your guitar again, it's very important that you listen to me because I'm about to tell you 5 mistakes that you might be making as a guitarist. Now, before you push back and go, hey, speak for yourself, guy, just hear me out and know that I'm here to help. Yes, these were mistakes that definitely applied to me at some point, but they could very well apply to you right now. Mistake number 1 is not practicing your vibrato. I see this all too often where guitar players will focus on every technique under the sun except vibrato, and it really shows when they're able to play really competently on the guitar, but then the second that they move to a vibrato, it's something like this. It's just this very manic, unsure, very uncontrolled, nervous motion, right? And to me, that completely negates every other technique that they've worked so hard on developing, because vibrato is a very fundamental technique to demonstrating your competency when you're playing guitar. And that's not just my opinion. That's an opinion that I've been subject to by countless musicians who all believe the same thing. And I think I can speak for a lot of guitar players when I say that you can really know the value of a guitar player based on how they vibrato. Now let me show you a quick hack that can remedy that so you can start taking control of your vibrato and play it at any speed you want. So let's just take one fret, for example, the 5th fret of the G string, right? Starting with our first finger. Now go ahead, first off, and just vibrato how you naturally vibrato. Maybe it's like, right? Or maybe it's like this. I see guitar players do this. The classical vibrato, right? Which is meant for nylon string classical guitars for a reason, and for, violins and fretless instruments like that, because the vibrato goes a lot further in terms of how the pitch moves. Now, you can vibrato like this on an electric guitar, but it's very subtle. So the rock vibrato definitely is more audible, right? So if you vibrato like this on the electric guitar, just try to refrain from that, okay? So if you're doing rock vibrato, and let's say it's kind of on the nervous fast side, which is fine, there's a time and place for that, right? What you want to do is start with how you naturally vibrato, and then, this sounds silly, but bear with me, just pretend that you're going into slow motion, right? So what you're doing is you're going to start with that fast, manic, rapid fire vibrato, and then gradually slow down as you enter slow motion, like this. Right? And really focus, exaggerate the movement of the pitch, right? So you can... So as you're slowing down, you still have that wide vibrato going on, right? This is how you gain control. And in a way, you're forcing your hand to, taper off how fast it's going. And over time, when you practice this, you'll start to feel yourself gain control over your fingers when you vibrato, especially towards the end when you really slow down. You can really start to feel the control. Now, what I want you to do is just focus on one fret. That's all you need, right? And try every single finger. So vibrato with your first finger, slow it down, and then do your second finger next, your third finger, right? And even your fourth finger, your pinky. So when you start your vibrato, it's kind of, this uncontrolled, chaotic movement. Just slowly allow yourself to take control, but make sure there's that taper, right? So you're gradually slowing down. You're not just going straight from fast to slow like that. It's gradual, right? So the reason why that gradual, tapering is important is because that's allowing you to start feeling control over a wide variety of speeds for vibrato, so that when you want to vibrato, you can vibrato fast if you want to, you can vibrato medium, and you can vibrato nice and slow. Right? It's all about control. I mean, those 3 speeds, you can pretty much accomplish anything you want, right? But a lot of guitar players can really only go 1 speed. So if you can try using this hack, this exercise, to break it down into 3 speeds, you're going to have much more control over your vibrato, and you will completely reverse that mistake you might have been making. Mistake number 2 you could be making as a guitarist is playing with a lack of dynamics. Now, dynamics are essential to being an expressive and emotive guitar player, right? Coupled with something like vibrato. I mean, if you have solid vibrato and solid dynamics, when I think about some of the greatest guitar players in the world, I mean, I'm going to go straight up to the top. Eric Clapton, right? vibrato and dynamics, I mean, are a huge, huge part of his style, and part of the reason why he's so legendary and why he's inspired so many guitar players to do the same. But unfortunately, there's not enough emphasis on that, right? With a lot of lessons that I see. So a quick little hack to work with your dynamics, similar with the vibrato exercise. Let's just take one fret here. Same thing, 5th fret of the G string. And dynamics, really come from your pick attack. A huge part of it is in your pick attack. So when you think about how you pick a note, maybe you pick it with, just like with vibrato, how you normally would have, or you naturally maybe had one speed. Maybe with your pick attack, you had one dynamic, which was maybe you pick hard, or maybe you pick soft, right? But maybe that's just naturally you just divert to that one style, whether it's really soft or really hard. But we want to explore dynamics, and we want to explore the wide spectrum of them, right? So when you're practicing, just start picking that note, start slow, and then gradually get harder with your pick attack, and then gradually slow down. So like this. And notice something, it's not just, in terms of like how hard or how soft you're picking in terms of the sound, but even volume too, right? When you pick softly, even though I haven't touched my volume knob, I haven't touched any knob, right, to change the volume, it's just all on 10, and yet, when I play nice and soft, the volume's low, but when I play hard, it's louder, right? So that should tell you something, that you have the dynamics, the control you have over your pick attack can also control your volume. So that's a great way to think about, when to use dynamics. So if you're playing in a situation, if you think about like all the greatest blues guitarists, right, where the band breaks down, it gets real quiet. And then, the guitar player just starts going like, just so it starts starting slow, but then just gradually building up, right? Then it starts to build up and get more climactic, and sometimes they'll bring it back down, So there's just some crude examples of like what actually happens in that situation. That all comes down to dynamics. Now, and a lot of it is, vibrato combined with your dynamics. Very, very important techniques that are, criminally underrated, So when you focus on your dynamics there, just start with one note and just just work those peaks and valleys, and then just get comfortable with it. So when you start playing licks and stuff like that, you can also try, there's like, let's say your favorite lick, or your favorite riff or whatever. Try playing it soft, try playing it fast, try doing a combination of both. You want to be able to play whatever it is that you already know how to play. There's so many more ways that you can play it, and how you use dynamics is a great way to take what you already know and add some, like a breath of fresh air to it. So it's no longer boring because you've been playing it, not just the same notes, but with the same dynamics the entire time. Mistake number 3 that you might be making as a guitarist is not using your voice to create musical ideas. Now that might sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but it's actually taken straight out of the book of jazz guitar. If you think about jazz guitarists going through school, and a lot of accomplished jazz musicians, what they're able to do is vocalize what they're playing, either simultaneously while they're playing it, or they can vocalize an idea and then bring it out on the guitar. So I'll give you an example. I'm just gonna scat something completely random and then translate it on the guitar. And what I'm gonna do is give myself 4 notes to work with. So I suggest you try the same thing. We're just gonna be doing using the 5th and 7th fret on the D string and the 5th and 7th fret on the G string. So the middle chunk, if you recognize, it's the middle chunk of the A minor pentatonic scale. Right here. It's that middle chunk, 5-7 on D, 5-7 on G, okay? Nothing fancy, just those 4 notes. So if I were to scat something like ba 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 da ba, right? I'm not worried about what notes I'm singing, right? I'm not even trying to sing notes. I'm just focusing on the rhythm and the beats, right? Ba 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 da ba. Okay, so let me use those 4 notes and come up with something. Ba 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 da ba. Right? Same amount of syllables or beats or whatever you want to, however you want to think of it, right? Ba 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 da ba. Now I can come up with something completely different to that exact same scat, right? Ba 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 da ba. Right? Or I can do something else like this. Right? There's so many different things that I can come up with. ba 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 da da, right? I could come up with a bunch of different ideas just by using that one idea that I just vocalized and just gave myself a couple notes to work with, and right there, just on the spot, coming up with all kinds of different ideas that I otherwise would not have thought of had I not used my voice to create it. And it doesn't matter how many syllables or beats you want to use, like just start slow. You can do something like da da da, right? Something like that, da da da, right? That's 1, 2, 3, da da da. That's 3 notes, right? Or 3 beats. So we have, there you go, da da da, right? Or, right? Or like, there's just different combinations as long as I'm playing those 3 notes in that kind of rhythm, right? You know, when I played that first one, that's cool because that's like a good repeating lick. So I can do like da 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 da, like. That's cool. That sounds like a deliberate musical idea, and I'm not doing anything fancy or flashy, nothing too difficult, something you could do right now if you're trying this out with me, right? Just pick something simple. You don't have to, scat all night long and then just try and translate that entire line, right? Start with just a handful of beats and then work your way up. And next thing you know, when you keep practicing this, you're gonna be able to come up with the idea in your head and then within seconds, bring it out on your guitar just from, practicing it that way. So definitely try that out. It could really open up your improvising. And speaking of improvising, that reminds me of mistake number 4 that you might be making as a guitarist, which is misusing the metronome. The metronome is an essential tool for musicians, but it's often misused, especially when we just tend to use it as a click that we practice scales to or exercises to, right? Which of course is something very important and it's something you should be doing. However, there's a lot more that we can get out of the metronome if we try something else. And that something else is improvising. So imagine improvising to a metronome rather than a backing track. So where a backing track has, chords and a full band mix in there, to give you harmonic ideas to work with and come up with melodies, practicing to just a click kind of forces you to think more in terms of rhythm and not so much on melody, which is equally important as a guitar player. So I'm gonna pull up a metronome right now and give you a right off the top of my head example of what it's like to improvise to a metronome. And with the same parameters, right, just those 4 notes, I'm just gonna set a metronome to whatever setting it's on and just leave it at that, let it play, and then just kind of mess around with those 4 notes and let's see what happens. So right there, I just pulled up a metronome app on my smartphone and let it play. It was set to 70 beats per minute. Just let it play. I used those 4 notes and just started playing, And because it was a metronome, it was a static click, it was making me focus on timing. So I wasn't trying to play on top of every click. I was trying to play in between and just thinking about different interesting rhythms with just those 4 notes that I have to work with. And, the ideas are potentially endless that you could come up with. It's also the perfect opportunity for you to practice the things that we had just gone over, like vocalizing an idea, coming up with it, right? Giving yourself just a handful of notes to work with, like those 4 work great, is just a starting point, right? Also practicing your vibrato, your dynamics, all kinds of different ways, just let that metronome play, come up with an idea in your head. You can even just do that in that order, right? Press play on the metronome, whether it's a smartphone app or Google metronome, or if you have one of those archaic real metronomes, whatever you're using to keep the time. Right? Come up, listen to the click, come up with one of those ideas, scat something out, and then give yourself those 4 notes to work with, and then just bring it to life on your guitar. What this is gonna do is next time you're playing with a band or you're playing even to a backing track, you're gonna focus more on phrasing and less on just playing a scale linearly, up and down the fretboard, right? Because phrasing is everything when it comes to soloing. That's really how you express yourself. And of course, if you add vibrato, dynamics, right, to that style of phrasing, that's just a winning combination. And especially when you're jamming with friends, same idea. You're just thinking about the click, right? Even if it's a drummer or if it's just the rhythm of your buddy playing, playing rhythm guitar, you're thinking about that click and you're coming up with different interesting ways to phrase those notes rather than just, like I said, playing them in a linear sort of way. Which sets us up perfectly for mistake number 5 that you could be making as a guitarist, which is practicing scales linearly. And by linearly, I mean a straight line, just ascending the scale and then maybe descending it, right? Not exploring any kind of variety in how you can navigate the scale, just practicing it up and down, up and down. Sometimes not even down. Like sometimes, I know I did this for a while too, where in the beginning I was just learning scale, I would just ascend the scale. I'd get really good at ascending the scale, but I'd be terrible at descending the scale, right? Which is also not good. But on top of that, practicing scales linearly sets you up for some pretty bad habits when it comes to learning how to solo. The reason for this is the key to phrasing, right? It's not about what scales you use, it's about how you use the notes that you're using, right? That's just like with speaking, right? If you think about speaking a phrase, it's a deliberate use of words. It's the same thing, a deliberate use of notes. Now, if you're just playing notes in a linear fashion, ascending and descending, you're really just practicing scales. You're not creating music and you're certainly not phrasing. So let me show you how you can fix this mistake. Let's take, for example, the A natural minor scale, okay? It goes like this. All right, that's ascending the scale. So we're gonna start with the 5th fret on the low E string with our first finger, and then 7th fret with our 3rd finger, 8th fret with our pinky, and then we're gonna do that exact same shape on the A string. So 5th fret, first finger, 3rd fret, 7th fret, 3rd finger, 8th fret, 4th finger. All right, and then 5th fret on the D string with our first finger, and then 7th fret with our 3rd finger. So that's the A natural minor scale. Okay, now if I were to ascend and descend, it would look like this. Right? Which sounds fine on its own, right? It's establishing the musical context of what the scale is all about, minor, right? But here's the thing, if I were to solo with that and just do that, that wouldn't really be much of a solo. I mean, let's be honest here. I have to really change things up a little bit. So this little hack I'm going to show you is a great way to exercise scales that will give you some new options with navigating, right? So if, let's say you want to just run up a scale for a lick that you're doing, which is totally warranted, right? Especially when it's done tastefully. Instead of just running up in a linear fashion, which you can do sometimes, right? But if that's all you're doing, this is a great way to break that pattern, okay? So what we're going to do, okay, and this is another thing that's kind of taken from the book of jazz guitar. Instead of practicing the scale linearly, right? Instead of just going in a straight line with the notes, we're actually going to be practicing in thirds. So we're going to be moving essentially every third note in the scale. And what that's going to do is break up the pattern so it sounds more deliberate, more musical, and frankly, more classical, right? You can really hear that this is something that, you know, is used a lot in classical music with the way that these scales are played. So one more time, if I'm doing this linearly, it'll sound like this. But check this out. If I do every third note, it'll sound like this. Completely different vibe, right? Same scale, same notes. I didn't deviate from any of that. But the vibe changed quite a bit. It sounded less practicey, right? Now, of course, it's still something you want to practice, but it's breaking that pattern of playing scales linearly. So I'm going to show you how we did this, all right? We start with, remember, we're doing every third note. So we're essentially skipping a single note in between the notes that we're playing. So starting with 5th fret on the low E string, we're going to skip straight to the 8th fret after that with our pinky. And then we're going to play the 7th fret, right? So we're going back. And then we're going to play the third note after that, which is the 5th fret of the A string. All right, so. All right, and then we're going to play the 8th fret on the low E string here. All right, and then the third note from that is the 7th fret of the A string. All right, and then moving down to the 5th fret of the A string. And then our pinky reaches over to the 8th fret. All right, so far we have. All right, then we have, we're going to play the 7th fret of the A string, right? And then the third note from that is the 5th fret from the D string, right? And then we're going to play 8th fret on the A string with our pinky. And then the third note from that is the 7th fret of the D string. And that concludes walking up the scale, ascending, right? Right? Totally different vibe from. All right, once we reach that upper octave, right, we're going to essentially descend now. So we're going to descend in thirds. So starting from, once we've hit that note, 7th fret on the D string, we're going to play 8th fret, on the A string. All right, then we're going to play 5th fret on the D string, and then the 7th fret on the A string. All right, then 8th fret on A, and then 5th fret on A. All right, and then 7th fret on A. Then pinky plays 8th fret on E. All right, and then 5th fret on A, and then 7th fret on E, and then 8th fret on E, and then 5th fret on E to conclude it. So it's right, which different vibe from. So when we're making that ascending and descending, movement, where we're breaking it up, we're breaking the pattern. So this is gonna probably feel like a tongue twister for your fingers, right? Where you're moving and it's especially gonna feel that way because you've built that habit of playing the notes in a linear sort of way. So that's kind of an indicator, right? If you find it's especially, difficult, where you have to really think and plan your next move, which is why you should do it slowly at first to get the hang of it, right? That's just kind of your way of just being honest with yourself and saying, man, I spent way too much time playing these scales linearly. And the A minor scale was just an example. We can use all kinds of different scales. I mean, if you wanted to do like the C major scale, for example, and do that same thing, right? Right, it's the same idea. It's just taking every 3rd note. Now, it doesn't have to stop there. If let's say you want to go even further, you can move in 4ths, you can move every 5th note. There's all kinds of different fun combinations you can work with just so that your fingers are really fluent in the movement, in the scales. So when you're practicing these scales, start with just, if you're already pretty comfortable playing them in a straight line, start with just doing every 3rd note. And that, trust me, that'll keep you busy for a while, right? Then you can start to think, okay, now I'm comfortable with every 3rd note, let's try every 4th note, and every 5th note, right? And then every 6th note if you want. I've personally never even tried every 6th note, but I bet that'd be crazy. So now you know 5 big mistakes that you could be making as a guitarist and how to fix them. And all these fixes play off of each other, right? They have a relationship. They all can work towards the same goal, which is to take your guitar playing to the next level. And part of reaching that goal is how you manage your practice sessions. So if you take all the fixes that you learned today and apply them to your practice regimen, you're doing the right thing. But I want to do you one even better and give you a free practice session cheat sheet that's going to show you exactly how to get the most out of your practice sessions in the least amount of time, which is super important, especially if you're busy like me. So be sure to click here to claim that practice sheet or check the link in the description box. And if you enjoyed this lesson, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, and be sure to check out our other relevant lessons right over here. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. I'm Eddie with Guitar Mastery Method, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.